Hello and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Limitless Leaders Lounge. This is a place where real stories meet real people. It's a place where we look beyond our titles and our achievements and discover the journey that shapes the person behind them. And as I always say, while we have incredible guests joining us, this show ultimately is about you, our viewers. What you can learn, what you can take away, and perhaps even what you can recognize within your own story. And today's conversation is about motherhood. It's about resilience, faith, disability, neurodivergence, advocacy, and finding purpose in some of life's most unexpected circumstances. Our guest today is Teresa Laviniere, founder of Voices Unheard. And her story begins with two very, very special people, her twins, Hannah and Jacob. Born prematurely at just 32 weeks old, Jacob experienced significant health complications from birth, and he was diagnosed as deaf, and at the age of 2, he was diagnosed with a very rare condition called Kabuki syndrome. And for Teresa, this began a journey of navigating healthcare, education, additional needs, and raising two special children, often with limited support. But somewhere within those difficult years, something else happened. Her faith was growing, her understanding was growing as well, and eventually her purpose also grew. Teresa began to see beyond the diagnosis and the labels. She learned to celebrate Jacob's neurodivergence, and she encourages him to identify and recognize his incredible gift and passion for music. But she was also watching Hannah. Hannah's compassion and maturity as the sister of a child with additional needs opened Teresa's eyes to another group whose voices can sometimes go unheard: young carers and siblings. And from these lived experiences came Voices Unheard, a community interest company created to raise awareness around deaf children and young people, neurodivergence, disability, and young carers, while empowering children to celebrate their differences and have their voices heard. Teresa's journey reminds us that sometimes purpose emerges from the very experiences we never would have ever chosen for ourselves. So today we're going to talk about the challenges, the lessons, the faith, the misconceptions that still need to be challenged, and the changes that need to come for voices to truly be heard. Because as Voices Unheard reminds us, every child has a voice, every difference has a story, and every young person deserves to be seen, heard, understood, and celebrated. The limitless leaders that are watching us today, I want to say please join in and give a warm welcome to the Limitless Leaders Lounge, Teresa Laviniere. How are you doing, Teresa?
Oh, I'm doing very well, and thank you, Letitia, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you for just listening to you. That's the first time I've ever heard anyone really break it down the way you have, and I just felt really moved, actually, really overwhelmed, and you know, this is wonderful. So thank you very much, and to everyone who's watching, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I know your story gives us an opportunity to really look at particularly meaningful. Well, it's a particularly meaningful conversation that we're having here, because this is not just about the personal stuff that you have to deal with on an everyday basis. It's also about the business side, the entrepreneurial side that you're bringing onto here. So the questions that are framed here for you is one that really moves from your personal journey as a mother into disability, awareness, inclusion, young carers, faith, and ultimately the creation of Voices Unheard. So my first question to you, Teresa, is take us back to the beginning. You gave birth to twins at 32 weeks. You found yourself navigating Jacob's deafness. And then you had to navigate the medical complications. and eventually a diagnosis of Kabuki syndrome. How did those early years change you as a mother and as a person?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question to reflect on to where I am now when taking it back. The pregnancy, I was just so excited because I'd left it quite late to make the decision, like, oh, I need to have something which I've always wanted, which is to have a family. And the pregnancy, I think that's just when I started to grow in faith, really, because I started to pray more, just thanking God for this, the pregnancy. I was going to have 2 babies, and I never get my grandmother, may she rest in peace, who was, my icon. I just absolutely loved her as a leader. This is a woman that, I really aspired to. My grandmother, in her faith, for one, she was very much in her faith. She was who would always make sure that I got to church. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I was buying all these pregnancy books, Jacob, and so Jacob, who loves music, as you did say that he just often sings, and it was really interesting that I was buying all these books, and I remember bringing them to show her, and she said, she's Dominican and her lovely accent, she said, the only book you need is your Bible. All these books you're buying, what are you buying these books for? And that's when she started to educate me in the need for prayer around the pregnancy and having 2 babies. And I think, with them coming early, it was nothing prepares you for premature babies, and nothing prepares you for the experience in the special baby unit as well. And then nothing definitely didn't prepare, with them being so tiny in these incubators, and you can hardly see them really. I think that immediately made me start to pray more for the strength that I knew I needed at that time, because of how challenging it became, because you're not, unlike other mothers, you're not bringing these babies home. You are in this hospital environment now, and the world of incubators and beeping monitors and everything else, and Jacob, which showed very, very from the very early stages that there was complications with his health. So I think in who it started to change me was realizing how much I needed to pray for these 2 babies, seeing the need of support they needed, and the strength that I needed, because of how overwhelming and how each day was so different. And anyone who's experienced babies in special baby units, every day is such a big challenge, in just seeing what these little babies are going through. Jacob was only £2.7, Hannah was only £3.10, so all of that, you're not prepared for that. And so I think, with and as a mother, instantly this
there he is.
There he is. There's Jacob. And by the time you hear his name, when he was given that wonderful opening, he kept hearing his name, like, me. But yeah, I think as a mother, when you're going through that challenge, when these little babies are so dependent on you in every single way, because they're trying to thrive as tiny as they are, that you realize how much more that you need to nurture. It really, you just realize how much they are depending on everything that you can give to them because of how tiny they are. So yeah, that was there's definitely something to reflect on that time.
And if I think like a newborn baby who already is so small in your hands, and then you've got another one who's even smaller, it's scary to carry them.
Well, I know that is the thing, because there's so much involved, because you can't touch them. You're only just putting your hands through these little incubators, so you can't even hold them for the first 2 weeks. So even that is like, I wasn't prepared for what this is going to be like. And then I was thinking that, the weight of both Hannah and Jacob was the weight of what a typical baby, like a 6 pound, 6.5, 7 pound baby would be. So this is 2 babies weighing that amount, and so I used to really sort of quantify it all, thinking, and then there's that want for them to start growing. But then that's when Hannah only had to come early because of Jacob, because that's why they came early, because of complications in the pregnancy with Jacob. So the signs were there with the complications with Jacob. So Hannah just had to come early through Jacob, really. And so she was feeding and everything else, and she was at home after 4 weeks because she put on her weight and she was doing everything that a baby needed to do. But Jacob, it was clear that there were the complications, which is why he had to spend further time in the special baby unit in intensive care. So it was quite an unknown as to why, he was struggling at that time.
Wow, it's definitely something no one could have ever prepared for anyone. I mean, who just imagines that they're going to have to face something like that? You've said that receiving Jacob's diagnosis at the age of 2 actually brought you some relief, because it gave an explanation for many of the challenges that he was experiencing. What would you say to parents who are currently fighting for answers or struggling to get their own child's needs recognized?
That's a really interesting, that is something that takes so much with the experience of listening to professionals. That's when I started to really question, the understanding of professionals, really, because the language that they started to use, which can be really hard because you're navigating it's all so unknown every step, especially as a first time mother. Is and especially babies that have gone through so much already. Yes, you can go to the toilet, Jacob. I was amazed at some of the language, because for an example, when they came home from the hospital and it was clear that Jacob had, health issues and there were struggles, they didn't know. They did say there was definitely a diagnosis of a syndrome to come, but they couldn't identify which one. Being a rare syndrome, which it turned out to be, he had to have his blood sent off so many times, because they kept trying to identify. And then they would say things like, I never forget when a pediatrician, so they're trained in, they're pediatricians, they're trained around children and, their health needs. But he said to me, well, we've got to really look at what we're going to think about the next steps around this diagnosis for him, because he's got dysmorphic features. You can see that. And I never forget, what does that mean, dysmorphic features? This is my beautiful boy. This is my child, my son, and you're talking about him in references of terms that I've not even heard. So they don't explain these things. Dysmorphic features is because of Jacob's, the characteristic of his face, which was for them identifying that there is a syndrome, that his ears are low set compared to where they should be. There was, but I think what, the advice that I would say is that, you are the expert, it's your child, and as much as the labels, which started to come from very early, that these people a lot of the time, not disrespecting, they are incredible with the work they do. I was thrown into the world of pediatricians, teachers of the deaf, because Jacob had his diagnosis of being deaf very early. But because he was showing signs of so many other health issues and growth abnormalities, complications with his feeding, there was he had a hernia which had to be removed. At only 11 weeks he had his first procedure. Yeah, he had to. That was just before he came out of hospital. So in this little incubator, that was put in an ambulance to go to Royal London for this first procedure, because they said that he had a growth that needed to be removed under local anaesthetic. So, there's so much that's happening, but at the same time, there's all these labels being thrown at you as you're trying to navigate through it, and these labels you can identify straight away as not being very positive, in the language. So, I think it's in all of that, it's your child, your love for that child, and you're seeing, from what I could see immediately, Jacob's determination and strength and how courageous, all these procedures, he would come out and then, you'd see him do what babies want to do, just want to feed again, and just, so then you start to have this admiration, with the challenges that some of our babies have to go through at such an early stage, that you just look at them with such admiration for their strength and courage, So when they're these professionals, these teachers of the deaf, for example, that I've had to experience, none of them have got a deaf child, Letitia, you see.
So they don't even talk from experience?
They don't talk from experience, and I'm sure there are many parents who will relate to this. They are in this role, they are given these titles, and again, to respect everything that they want to take that line of work, these teachers of the deaf, you know, they take that line of work to educate deaf children with British Sign Language, everything else, but they don't have a child who's deaf. So when you're trying to express certain things, they then think because they're the professional that they know, but they do not know, because you've got to, and I'd say that's one thing I always remember, that, you know, you're the expert, you're the real professional, you know, so whatever they come with, you know, it's all well and good, and you can, you know, appreciate, but to always stand firm in knowing that it's your child, your experience, and you seeing, you know, the gift that is in your child. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, his strength still shines through. When I see his videos and he's at the front of the ministry and he's encouraging people, singing and he's dancing, and you think, wow, you know, this child is going to be a he will, and he's got such a great mother behind him as well. One of the beautiful things you speak about is learning not only to understand Jacob's neurodivergence, but also to celebrate it. This is what you mentioned before, and also encouraging his deaf identity as a hearing parent. What was Jacob taught? So what has Jacob taught you about looking beyond a diagnosis or a label and seeing the person, their gift and their potential?
Because you know, again, just with the whole diagnosis, the labels that came with the diagnosis, you know, then, you know, Jacob was, you know, given this diagnosis of the Kabuki syndrome, which, you know, and it was a real relief, Letitia, because by then, you know, at least I started to understand that there is a reason around some of the health issues that Jacob was experiencing, and the Kabuki syndrome. That's why it took so long. It took 2 years, because it's so rare, and they're doing so much research still, because it affects children in so many different ways. As a syndrome, it affects them so many ways that they still try and identify why that is. So Jacob's affected his growth. It's growth abnormalities, so it affects the growth in a child. So many of the families that I know that have got children with Kabuki, that it's affected their organs, so that their heart shape, they've had to have heart surgery, but Jacob's was all around his ears, nose and throat, which is why Jacob is deaf. So that's, the deafness is a characteristic of the Kabuki syndrome. Yeah. So you know, with all of the with all of that, you know, like as you just said, you know, you see this joke, they do call them, saying hello to, just saying hello to everyone. They do actually call them Kabuki warriors. And I never forget when once I started to connect with other families who've got children with Kabuki, and got directed to a charity as well that are all around, you know, Kabuki awareness, that you see that with all the challenges they go through, because all of the children go through hospital procedures for these growth abnormalities, which is part of, you know, what the syndrome is about, that they are always also very very happy and very just determined, and just, you know, you would never believe they go through all those challenges, because they quickly just leave behind what happened, and then they're there in the present moment of like enjoying what they need to enjoy, you know. And and so I think that's what started to become a real learning for me, because, you know, I've not experienced seeing somebody who, you know, to go through, and it's my own child, to go through so many challenges and health issues, and the continuation of so many different appointments. Jacob going to hospital appointments became his norm. Children going to play centres, Jacob going to hospital, that became his norm. And I used to see that when you get to hospital waiting rooms and start to play with everything, because it became his normal world of being in hospitals, you know. And so when I could see that, and I sometimes would see this, and maybe that's now reflecting on the fact that I did a lot of this on my own with, you know, with the Jacob's appointment. In fact, all of the appointments I did on my own. And I think, you know, now looking at how God was just guiding that, giving me the strength to do it on my own, because it allowed me to really start to observe more around Jacob, you know. You know, I could see that it was a real learning about that sort of strength and determination in our children that have these complications, but they don't complain, you know. They really just focus on what they've got to get on with. And one of the main things that they focus on is just being like every other child. And I could see that, maybe having twins, I could see that Jacob's determination to always just do and play and be as his twins, as Hannah was doing, you know. So I think, you know, my learning has been something to really start to appreciate, in seeing the qualities in, a child or a person that goes through so many challenges but can still keep focused on embracing the day, and there's no reflection of no complaints and I could see where Hannah would encourage that as well. And I think, also just with being neurodivergent, the difference in learning, because I was seeing it firsthand. Hannah very typically growing and a very bright, intelligent baby, and who she is even now as a 14-year-old, but then also seeing Jacob having to learn in a very, very different way. And they'd call it what they used to call, no, she's coming, Hannah's going to come. Like Hannah typically learning her ABC, A for apple, B for ball. See, Jacob didn't learn his ABC, and all the labels at the school were saying, all the negative ways of the education system. But he's not learning his ABC at the moment, so he's struggling and he's finding it difficult. But no, what was happening with Jacob was he needed to learn the ABC in his own way, not the typical way that the education system puts on our children. He was starting to show a real love for music, a passion for music. And for an example, Letitia, which was, it is amazing that, just because I had the time during the COVID, I was able to teach Jacob his alphabet through his passion of music, because he was starting to remember music artists' names, know the songs that they sing. And I was saying to the school, because there was year 2, so he's 7, 8, still not learning his ABC. And I was saying, I think you need to teach him through his love of music. But remember, the education system, they're going to keep doing what they know how to do, and that's it, But because I had that time over the COVID, I taught him his alphabet through his knowledge of music artists. And that's when I saw that, the education system are not ready for that change in that learning. And for me, it was fascinating because I was able to print off all pictures of all celebrities that he loves. And then during one of the home learning online, he came on the screen and I said, oh, Jacob's learnt his ABC. And they said, oh, really? I said, yeah, he has. And I said, Jacob, say your ABC. And he said, A for Alicia Keys, B for Bruno Mars, C for Drake, E for... It's really rare. It was so random, so varied as well. E for Elton John. And he went right the way through the alphabet. T for Tina Turner. It was so incredible. And that, that is the thing with neurodivergent children, whether they're autistic, ADHD, the whole, as they want to call it, spectrum. Our children, which I was seeing in Jacob, has a hook on. He hooked onto music. That became his real passion to focus, and it becomes an incredible focus. So that was starting to become my learning, that show him something that he's passionate about with music. There's a real different determination and almost like obsession. It was like, and it's an obsession that we wouldn't know about. So So yeah, I think what was so interesting, I was seeing the very difference in learning with Hannah and with Jacob, and so that's when I started to see, Letitia, who's to say that that's a learning delay? He knows more music artists than
you see.
So it's a different, So, but then that became a real challenge in the school, because it was interesting that when Jacob displayed that, the teachers still didn't pick up on it as a way to say, wow, look at that, we're learning it then. They have to still go back into their typical way of needing to teach my child, showing that that's not how he needs to learn. So I think in all those ways,
need to explore the different styles of learning for different children. But at the moment, I think they follow curriculum, isn't it? And when they step outside of that, then they could get in trouble for it as well.
Well, exactly. It started so during the school experience, the education system, that's when it really started to teach me a lot about myself as well. And I thank God for the strength in becoming a voice for Jacob, because then I realized, because he didn't start talking till he was around sort of 6, started, so they would take advantage of that, that he wouldn't be able to come home and tell me things that were happening.
When you say they take advantage, what were they doing?
Well, that's a very good question, because it was, I made a decision to put them into a mainstream school because I wanted Hannah and Jacob to be together, and I could see Hannah wanted to be to check in on her brother. I could really see that. That's why, you know, as we was going to go on around young care, I really could see that in Hannah wanting to be with her brother. So I thought, well, I need to put them in a mainstream school, not separate them at that stage from, you know, primary. But, you know, to find out then, I put them in a mainstream which had a specialist deaf resource base for children who were deaf. So I thought, wow, I found the perfect mainstream school. And, you know, I even had to go for an appeal to get Hannah into that school. So there was so much around getting them in the right school. But then because Jacob couldn't come home and tell me certain things that were happening in his school, I found out that they were keeping him in that deaf base all day, not accessing his classroom with other children. And that's something that, you know, the challenges in this system, which can be really challenging, you know, because then when we've got children that are, you know, their language or non-verbal, for us as parents, it can be a real concern, because you're sending these children into these environments with the absolute hope that they are being cared for, which is what you expect the education system to be about. But then there are some, as we know, which is why it is a fight and a battle for us as parents, that sometimes it's not going to be that level of support that you're going to expect, you see. So all of that, and around even the teachers of the deaf, like I said, not a lot of time they're not coming from lived experience, so you're depending on them to give you the information that you need. Because I'm a hearing parent, and it is as high as 90% of deaf children are born to us as hearing parents. So what do we now know about raising a child who's deaf and what he's going to need around his identity being deaf, wearing hearing aids, and his culture being deaf, and the deaf community? There's nothing to signpost us to help us understand what that's going to look like. So there's so much learning, Letitia, you know, in how to understand, and then with the one, I think you have that expectation that you're going to have this support, and it's not there. So really all we can do then is, as parent carers, is support each other. But then sometimes, you know, that it's easy to, which I did, you go into a world of isolation because you're just trying to navigate so much and focus on it so much, you kind of forget that there is the outside world, that there are maybe other people that can support.
Yeah. So it's finding them. So I know with all this, I mean, it's such a special conversation, this, and I know it's going to bless so many people. There is another important person in this story, Jacob's twin sister, Hannah. So watching her care, compassion, and maturity opened your eyes to the experiences of young carers. Do you think siblings like Hannah can sometimes become the unseen child in families where another child has significant additional needs, and what support do they need?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And it started to you know, make me feel, I think that's what we do sometimes as parents in these, you know, these sort of journeys when you've got a child with disability, is really trying to, you know, make sure you're getting the balance right. And then we can be really hard on ourselves, because you do see that, you know, there's so much emphasis around, so there was so much emphasis around Jacob because he had so many different, you know, being deaf, the diagnosis with the Kabuki, speech and language therapists to help try and support with his speech language. You know, Jacob wasn't dry, you know, he was still, you know, in Pampers until he was about 5 before going to school. So there was someone coming around to try and help give advice on him. There was so much going around Jacob, you know, these professionals are constantly coming in, and you've got these appointments, and Hannah's got to be coming along with that all the time, you know, and she's got to see these professionals coming in for Jacob. And, but there was something that I would see that she just adapted to that. It's like her understanding of like, well, this is my brother that I know needs that help. And I saw that from the youngest age, and because even from when they were at nursery and it was being observed, because she's got a twin brother that also is in hospital a lot of the time, and you could see that when he would not be in nursery and then at school on these appointments away for having these procedures, they used to see something in her in that day, you know. And even when I put them in the mainstream school, the teachers noticed that. So it's a real maturity, even at a 4-year-old, you know, 5 years. So that's why I think, you know, it's not really celebrated of what it does for this child, because they've just got to grow up and become nurturing, and all of these characteristics that is just natural to Hannah. I could see that in her. And even when they started the mainstream, one of the teachers said that because they put them in different classrooms, but there was a free flow. And they said that she would just get up sometimes, just get up and walk across to look to see where Jacob was in his classroom, and then go back and sit back in her chair. Like she needed to feel like that reassurance that I know, oh, he's okay, I can see him. And then she would look for him in the playground, check, because he always had a one-to-one support, check that he had the one-to-one support. I'll do that. Check that he's got his support with him, who she would identify, and then go off and play with her friends. So, so that's all happening without even, no one's training her to be like that, So I do think they become very mature. And I've seen her and to identify, which started to come quite clear as a young carer, because she's caring for her twin brother without even, being asked to, I think. Sorry, Jacob's gone and changed his outfit. He does like to do that a couple of times during the day. And because I think I was talking about his love for music, he's gone and this is one he loves. The 90s. He's got his this is Biggie Smalls. Yeah.
Are you a fan of Biggie Smalls?
Yes. He knows all of his songs.
That's so amazing.
So I think a bit more around, I have spoken about it at the school. I said, there should be something which brings young carers like Hannah, that she can meet other children like her who's got siblings who've got special needs or disabilities. But the school, again, it's out of their remit really. And I do think, in answer to that question, that something should be done which brings them together. Let them recognise that they've got an exceptional role as a sibling. But there isn't much. And certain boroughs which historic have like young carers groups where they can meet other children. But I don't think it's not sort of instilled like in the school to let them know that is something that they should be part of, really. So just more talk around that, I think.
Yeah, and raise more awareness as well.
So
before motherhood, Teresa, you had built a career in interior design, but your circumstances eventually lead you in a completely different direction. And out of everything you experienced came Voices Unheard. Was there a particular moment when you realized my lived experience now needs to become a voice for other families and children?
Yes. There was a point, my interior design was something I was always so passionate about. And, it took a bold step to finally, start on my own and, sort of manage my own client doing interior design, because I studied interior design. I then freelanced with interior designers, like, just to assist as an assistant. And it was a wonderful journey with, a wonderful client that I met that allowed me to take on my first sort of big project. And in fact, when I went to take on the project was when I found out I was pregnant with Hannah and Jacob. So I nearly didn't take the project on. I nearly taught myself, I actually tried to convince her that I couldn't take on her big project, even though it was like going to be an amazing opportunity. And but I took it on because I think she had more confidence in me than I did myself. That, and she was very patient. I had Hannah and Jacob, and then it was a project that I worked on over some of the most difficult times, really. But it was wonderful. And I think the importance of really keeping in tune with what you're passionate about. Because even with what was going on with Jacob and everything else, I was slowly working on this project with her. But then, I think with so much going on, and then in all of that time, realizing I was doing it all on my own. So then it meant a separation, because I really started to feel God's presence in showing me that in all of this, God's given me the strength. Where's this strength coming from? And then I could look back at times of the hospital procedures and things like that I was experiencing, that to not look at it in any other way, no frustration about the fact that maybe I was doing a lot of it on my own, but to be thankful that clearly God was giving me the strength to do it all, and the learning that was coming from it, and my excitement around, like, what I was learning around myself, and with, learning about these two wonderful babies that God has gifted me with, So I but something always has to give, and I think I did start to lose my way, lose my confidence in what I'd built up, this interior design business and plans and other things I wanted to do. Something had to give, and I did. I really put it down, and that's a shame. If anything, when you're passionate about, you've built something, but I think with so much trying to manage so much. But one thing I did start to find value in is what I was sharing before, is in realizing that, the professionals, the expectations that you may have on people giving you that support, it was coming from other parent carers. And I started to see the real value that, it really comes from being around people that understand your journey. Not even
Mm.
family members, because, there's no one. Jacob's the first child in this family with a disability, who's rare syndrome and who's deaf. And so, you've got your family dynamics are not going to understand either. But then we are going to expect them to, because you think it's family and that's what they family should do. But, as
Mm. It's new to
I
them as
started
well.
to,
Mm.
yeah. And I think because I then started to grow in my faith, there's a wonderful sister, I started to understand the support that God then puts around you with people that can uplift you. A
Mm.
wonderful sister, which was an incredible. She's like a life coach, but very spiritual. It does it in a very spiritual way. She was the one that said, "You do realize that the journeys that we go through, it's not about just for you. God is strengthening you so
Mm.
that you can then be a voice in what you're experiencing for others." And that was the first time I'd actually heard those words, to think, really, and then so yeah, I think that there was a point where my faith started to grow. I started to join more prayer groups with other sisters to share with, and then really putting interior design fully aside. I started working in my local area as a parent carer, part of a Thurrock Parent Care Forum. It's a forum of parent carers that work with the local authority, and we give feedback around our children with special needs, because every local authority by law should have that, because they need for the education system to start to understand what the challenges are. And then I just put everything into that, because then I started to listening to what I felt was what God was directing me to do, to be
Mm.
at Voice. Um, and so then I started to see that. So we used to organise coffee mornings and get parent carers to come along. And then I started meeting parent carers who were like me, quite isolated, and then seeing that they were, oh, it's good to talk to somebody else that understands. And
Mm.
so then that's what started to move me in that direction of realizing how the value, because even though I was doing it, I was enjoying, because coming from family dynamics which wasn't supportive, and that's the truth, that it wasn't. I started to feel
Mm.
that, you start to build your own family support network, um,
Mm.
by sharing with people that understand. And then, of course, starting to grow in faith with the children, with Hannah and Jacob, the family around us that was coming through the churches that we were going to. Um, so yeah, it became I just found I was just going on a very different journey, um, with understanding how important it is to see who God is putting around you, and that direct, you start to feel that direction happening.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Teresa, the Limitless Leaders Lounge is really about our viewers taking something away that can impact their own lives. And what my question for you now is for the parent watching who is exhausted from advocating for their child, or for the young person who feels misunderstood, judged, or perhaps even defined by a label. What would you like them to hear today?
Yeah, I think, what started to really become very important is, recognizing the strength that you have.
Mm.
It's so challenging. But in all of that, I started to really see, like I said, I started to really give thanks that God was giving me the strength. And I think that's what it is. I think it's when you start to recognize the strength that you have got to keep it
Mm.
moving. You know, your child's been given to you as a blessing, as for a reason, in what you're, what I started to see, what I'm learning. And then, as much as anyone else might want to say things that are of negative ways, to really just block that out, and just to know that, there's no question that strength that you have, that love for yourself, and the strength that, you have, and that God has given you, and to just know that, you know, there is support. I think that's what it is as well. Sometimes that's what can be very, you know, difficult, is that you feel like you might be on your own, and you're not alone, you know. And it took me a real journey to start to see that. And that's why, you know, in the midst of it all, you know, Voices Unheard, you know, was something that I just knew I had to start building to create this community interest charity, knowing that if it means that it can create a platform for voices to be heard, creating safe spaces to know that, you know, it's possible to be able to come and be part of something where you can feel accepted and valued. And no matter where or whatever it might look like in your home circumstances, your family circle, the school, you know, creating spaces which are needed where you can feel you are part of something, you know, because you know, there's to that parents, you know, there's a quote that I never forget when I heard Michelle Obama, when she said, and I remember I heard her on doing this talk, and she said, and I rewound it so many times, Letitia, to get it to write it down word for word, where she said, you know, we cannot wait for this world to be equal. You know, we cannot wait for the school systems to do what we think they should do. But, you know, she said, you've got to find the tools within to be seen. You know, you've got, so it's to know your strength, know the gifts. You know, they can label Jacob all day long, right? And even though he's now in a special needs school, so I had to go through the whole process. When I realised what that school was doing, I pulled him out of that school. He's now in a special needs school. But again, there are the challenges there that, you know, they're still not educating him. You know, he is a child that can learn. You know, there's aspirations for Jacob as well. There's aspirations for all of our children. They are here for a reason, you know, a purpose. And so, you know, with Jacob and his abilities that he's showing to have, which I see in him. And as parents, you know, we see that in our children. We see the gifts that they have. But just because the education system, the society are not really equipped to see what we see, to really hold on to what you know. And, you know, like I said, being the advocate for your child, being the voice for your child. And even if sometimes, which is what we find, some parents that may not feel that they have, you know, feel that they can be that voice, to know that there is support then to tap into, where there are those that can help support to be that voice for that child. Because every child deserves, you know, as I see with Jacob, you know, because of the right encouragement, the love that is around him, you know, I can see his confidence growing because he's being encouraged around his gifts and what he loves to do. And Hannah's encouraging him as well. And so, you know, I think I can see that in Jacob as an example. You know, give them all what they are passionate about, what they love. Forget if the school system are not providing it, we could spend so much time trying to fight them to hear us. And most of the time they're not going to. They're just not. You know, so, you know, I think it's then just finding things external outside to find ways around it to you know, to give our children what they need and what they deserve to have.
Wow,
Yeah.
what a beautiful, beautiful story. And for our listeners out there, don't just wait to be heard or seen, but put yourself out there. Raise awareness, and remember, you are never, never alone. Thank you so much, Teresa. This has been a beautiful and thought-provoking conversation. Teresa, I just want to say you are so special, and what you are doing with Jacob and Hannah and what you are doing through Voices Unheard is just phenomenal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down the links to where people can see what you're doing, where they can contact you as well if anybody needed any support. And this brings us to the close of our session today. Today we have heard a story of motherhood, faith, and resilience. We've heard a story of advocacy and purpose. But we have also been reminded of something incredibly important. Sometimes we need to stop speaking about people and start creating spaces where we can actually listen to them. And Teresa has shown us how she was able to create voices unheard, rather, because she felt that there were people whose voices needed to be heard. Behind every diagnosis is a person. And Teresa has demonstrated that so beautifully. And behind every label is a story. And behind every child who learns, communicates, or experiences the world differently is an individual with gifts, with dreams and potential, and a voice that deserves to be heard. And Teresa, I love that your journey hasn't only taught you how to advocate for Jacob and other deaf people, but it has also opened your eyes to young carers like Hannah, whose experiences can so easily go unnoticed. But their strength is also seen in that. From such a young age, she was able to care for her brother, even in school, taking that time away to make sure that he's okay. And these are the type of stories that we need to hear. People are doing extraordinary things, but society does not recognize them. So thank you for creating Voices Unheard for people like her. And to everyone watching today, perhaps there is someone around you whose voice you haven't quite heard just yet. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's your sibling, a student, or maybe it's someone living with a disability or navigating life differently from you. What could change if we stopped making assumptions and simply started listening? That is a challenge I want to leave with all of us today. Teresa, thank you for turning your lived experience into Voices Unheard and using your journey to create greater awareness, understanding, and inclusion for others. And to our viewers, thank you once again for joining us. Remember, the Limitless Leaders Lounge is about you, challenging how you think, inspiring how you live, and encouraging you to recognize the difference that you too can make. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep breaking limitations. And never underestimate the power of using your voice to help someone else find theirs. Because every child has a voice, every difference has a story, and every young person deserves to be seen, heard, understood, and celebrated. We will see you again next time on the Limitless Leaders Lounge. Thank you.